Hello, and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. The last time we got together, I showed you a group of fifes, and they all had holes for mouthpieces, and I showed you 2 or 3 of them that I had. So I want to show you today a fife. Actually, it's called a walking stick flute, but it is basically a fife, and some music stores will call it a fife. Here's your long shot of this fife. This is a very, very long instrument. It's at least 3 feet long. I was thinking about measuring it, but I didn't get a chance to do it, but I know I've done it before, and we have at least 3 feet here. Now, if I turn it to the side, and you won't be able to see the whole thing, but on this end would be where the mouthpiece is. You can see the hole for the mouthpiece right there, and it's a perfectly round hole, and this is the way fifes are. And then you go down here, and you start to get into the fingerings, the tone holes for, I need to move my hands up here, I can feel them, the tone holes for the music that you play. And so it plays a full octave, and I think it plays in the key of D. I've checked it before. I marked it as A, but I think it also plays in the key of D, and this is it. Now, I brought this to a place where I was playing, to a church service where I was playing in the orchestra, and somebody yelled out, "She's playing her cane." It is a walking stick flute, but it does look like a cane. But you do not want to put your full weight on it, because you would break it, because the whole inside of it is vacant, it's empty. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to play music on it. And if you wanted to, in order to shorten it to play it, you could take from this foot joint down, you could take that section off. It'll screw off. You know, I never do. I always leave it on. I mean, I've had it off to check it out, but I keep it on. But this is basically for decorative service. And then where does the music go? Well, if you look at the back, there is a hole in the back of it right here. So the air does not have to travel all the way down to the end. It doesn't have to travel, it just comes down here. You could also, if you wanted to, and I'll move it up a little, take this part of the head joint off, because that looks like where you'd hold it for a cane, and that is the place where you could screw that off. And from here to here, this is where the music is being made, from this hand down to this hand. Everything below is decorative, and everything above is somewhat decorative. There would be a block in here, so the ear could not go in 2 directions at once. There would be a cap in it, just like a flute would have a cap in it. So when you blow into it, the air only goes in one direction. So this is the mouthpiece, and the air goes down in this direction because this is all capped off. Very fascinating instrument. I bought it as a novelty device, but it plays quite well. And I have played it in orchestras. I can only play it when I've got the room to move it, though, unless I want to take off those 2 extensions, and I don't, because the fun of playing it is that it's so extraordinarily large that you would never find a flute this long. So I sit in a position where I have room to have it stick out quite a bit on one side, and then I play it, and everybody's fascinated by it. What I like to do when I'm in orchestras even is to bring in instruments that I can play, but that most people have never seen. Most people will never have seen anything like this. But it is a fife, technically a fife, because of that round hole that acts as its mouthpiece. And there are no tone holes in the back. There is that hole that the ear goes through right here, you know, so that you don't have to have this attached if you don't want it attached. But it is a fascinating instrument, and it is made to look like a walking stick, so it is called a walking stick flute. Plays like a fife, it's in perfect pitch, it plays very well. I've used it. You'll find that the finger stretches are a little bit much if you have problems with your hands. But you don't have to reach down to this hole where the music comes out, and you just put it on and blow through it, and it really is nice. You blow across it. It's just like a regular flute, except it's ranged like a fife. That's the kind of tone that you get. It's a very nice tone, and I have used it. The only problem I would have with it is the fact that the finger stretches are really quite long. Now, I don't have that much trouble with it, but if I were to play it for a long period of time, I would have a problem with it because of arthritis and injuries I've had to my hand. You have to realize that if you're a musician, you can be injured while playing. And I can remember when I took, as I was rehearsing, I was playing it was an alto recorder, which is larger than a regular recorder, and I took this joint, my fourth finger joint, took it right out of the socket. And the pain was excruciating. And as a result of that, I mean, I could have had corticosteroid shots for it and all of that, but I didn't bother with it. I wanted to let it heal naturally. I used a compression glove on it, and that kind of held it in place. And it did heal, but it looks perfectly normal. But I can only stretch it so far. It never healed 100%, and I wouldn't have expected to. It was quite an injury. So if you are playing instruments, there are certain injuries that you can get after long years of use. Now, you're not going to get them right away, but with the flute, it's common to have shoulder injuries because of the way you have to hold it. And if you're playing piano, it's common to have wrist injuries because of the way that you're playing. Any instrument has a way to get injured on it. So I can't stretch the last two fingers of this right hand. I can't stretch it as much as a lot of people do. So I usually play music and write music where I can stay away from the low C because it's hard to stretch the finger. It's not like I can't do it, but I'm limited somewhat in doing it. And so therefore, here it is, a walking stick flute. Now, on the next segment, I'm going to show you another one that's even bigger than this and is made out of bamboo and came from the Caribbean. But this is large enough for most people. So I'll just put this down. I wanted you to have a chance to see it. I have had it before. Now I want to turn to doing things with timing. I've talked to you about you doing dotted eighths and sixteenths and triplets, and I did some work with it in the last segment. I kind of want to do a review of that and play a piece that I wrote that has both triplets and dotted eighths and sixteenths in it. As a matter of fact, that's basically all it has, and it's a march. So if we can just look at this chart, we have the whole note here. Now we're going to assume, and I'm doing this on the basis that this is 4/4 time, because it will be a little different if it's in any other kind of time. But this is a normal time anyway that most music has. So you have a whole note, 4 beats. If you were to split that in half, you would have 2 half notes, each 2 beat, and combined they would make 4. If you were to split the half notes in half, and then you would have 4 quarter notes, and it would be 2 to a half note, 2 to a half note. So you have 4 quarter notes, and they are at a whole. They add up to 4 beats. If you were to put the half notes and split them in half, then you would have 8 eighth notes, and they can be written in different ways, but you would count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, because it's half. Each 2 eighths is half of the quarter note. And if you just split that, split the eighth notes, then you get 16th notes, and you get 4 to a beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And normally I would teach children to count 1 a tizza, 2 a tizza, 3 a tizza, 4 a tizza, because it works. It may sound a little crude, but it works. You could split the 16th notes, and then you would get 32nd notes, and if you split the 32nd notes, you would get 64th notes. Now, that's way beyond what we're going to be doing in this class, but we will get up to the 16th notes. Now, here's a kind of a review in itself. The same thing, I'm going over the same thing, but getting more involved with the 32nd and 64th notes. Here we have the whole note, 2 halves, 4 quarters, eighth notes, and then you have the 16th notes. If you split a 16th note, you get a 32nd note. The 32nd note has 3 flags on it, where the 16ths have 2 flags and the 8ths have 1 flag. If you take the 32nd notes and split it, you will have 64th notes, and you will have 4 flags to each note. That's the way that it runs. You split and you get twice as much. That's just the way it is. Now, here's another review right here. This gets to be important in several ways. If you have a dotted quarter, that's the same thing as having 3/8 notes. Now, how come is that? Well, a quarter note is 1 beat. If you add half of it, it's 1 plus a half. That 2/8 notes equal 1 quarter, and then that 8th note here would be the half, you know? So if you would count it 1, 2, and that would be it, 1, 2, and you often see the dotted half notes followed by an 8th note in music. A lot of music is written this way. And so mathematically, you get 2/8 notes here with a quarter, and add that dot, which is 1/2 of the value of the note, that's another 8th note. So totally, you get 3/8 notes. So a quarter equals 2/8. Or you can write them this way as well. Now, if you were to split the 8th notes, you would get 2/16. Now, there are different ways of writing 16ths. So a 16th has 2 flags on it. So you could have 2 or 2 flags for the 16th note. Now, the dotted 8th and 16th looks like this. You have the dotted 8th followed by the 16th. The dotted 8th note is the same thing as having 3/8 notes. The dotted 8th is like, wait, I'm sorry, I got to backtrack here. The dotted 8th is like having 3/16, because when you split the 8th note, you get 2/16. And then you add the dot, which is half the value of that. That makes your third 16th note. So it's like 3/16 notes, and then you add the 4th 16th note, and you get the full beat. Let me go on from here. It can get to be a little complicated, and mathematically it's complicated. It's hard to explain it. I want to explain once again about the triplets. Triplets are 3 notes to a beat. This would be 1 beat, 2 beat, 3 beat, 4 beat. Now, the only reason I'm doing it's so many of them on that line, is that I want to show you how it can be written. It can be written with a hold on it, but it's always written as 8th notes with a 3 above it. Then you know it's supposed to be a triplet, because if you don't have that 3 above it, you're not going to count it in the same kind of way. Or it can just have the 3 on it, or it can have the 3 with the, I could put it underneath, 3 beats, 3 notes, 1 beat. So I drew a couple of charts yesterday. When you see a dotted 8th and 16th, this is what it looks like. And this is the different ways that you can draw in an 8th note. If you take the 8th and you split it, you get 2/16. If you have a dotted 8th, that's going to be equal to 3/16, because split the 8th note, you get 2/16, add the dot, and that's half the value of the note. That adds another 16th, so you have the 3/16. And then if you want a full beat, you've got to add another 16th to it, and you can do that. You just write it like this, and then you get a full beat. If you see a dotted 8th and a 16th, then you have 1 beat from that. Just like if you see the triplets, you have 1 beat, 3 notes, 1 beat. The dotted 8th and 16th is 1 beat, and it's arranged so that you have 3, this would be the equivalent of 3/16 when you split it, and this is the second 16th. How do I know? This has got the second flag on it. That makes it a 16th. Now, I hope this doesn't get too complicated. It's not that easy to explain it out. You have to kind of have a mathematical nature to do that. Now, here's a song that I wrote that I'm going to be playing. And this song has triplets and dotted eighths and sixteenths. So you have triplets, and I have the 3 above it, over here, over here, over here, over here. Those are all triplets. All the other notes, for the most part, all the other notes are dotted eighths and sixteenths. When you play a dotted eighth and sixteenths, I call it like a galloping sound, you know, because we have the dotted eighth and 16th. This dotted eighth is 3 times longer than that 16th. That's just the way it works out, because you have the 3/16 for part of the beat, and then the 4/16 for the rest of the beat. It is all one beat. So I hope this won't get too complicated, but let me play this song for you. I won't play it too fast. It is a march, but we'll go over it. That last note is a stinger. I don't know, yeah, right here. This is the last note. I should have put a dot on the top of it. That would make it a stinger. Well, let me try it again, and I'm not going to do it that fast. It's a regular march, but the whole thing is based upon triplets and dotted eighths and sixteenths. Now, so let me kind of dissect it for you. Here's 4/4 time signature, and you're into treble clef, and you're starting off with the triplets. 1, 2, 3, that's one note. Now that's like an introduction because there's only 3 notes, 1 beat to that introduction, but that's not unusual to write music that way. But when you write music, it's not unusual to have a 2 or 3 note introduction. You don't have to have a full measure. This is just one beat. If I wanted to, and I didn't do it this way, I could have written a full beat by getting 3 rests, you know, like a half rest and a quarter rest, a half rest and an 1/8 note rest, and then go ahead with these 3. Now, here's your dotted 8th and 16th, dotted 8th, 16th, a regular quarter note, and then your triplets. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats, and 4. Oh, this is 1 beat, 2 beats, 3rd beat, and 4th beat. Here's your dotted eighths, 1 beat, 2 beat. Here's your quarter, that's 1 beat, and the 4th beat are the triplets. So the whole march is based upon the triplets and the dotted quarter and eighth, the dotted quarter and 16th notes. So that's the way it is. Now, normally I would play this twice, so I put a repeat sign here and a repeat sign there. And so therefore it is a short song, but if I did it twice, it wouldn't be so short. And marches aren't that long anyway. So that's if you just take a look at the music, triplets, dotted 8th, 16th, dotted 8th, 16th, quarter note, and then triplets. And that's the way it goes. And you get your full 4 beats that way. I could have written it in a different way, but this is the way I wrote it. And it's not that hard to read it. Dotted 8th, 16th, 1 beat. Dotted 8th, 16th, 1 beat. Quarter note, 1 beat, and triplets, 1 beat. So you get your full 4 beats in. If you have a time signature and the time signature is for a certain number of beats, no matter how you write it up, you can subdivide the notes any way that you want to subdivide them. But you have to make sure that you have the 4 beats. If you write it in 2 beats, then no matter how you write it, that it has to go with the 2 beats per measure. 3 beats per measure would be waltzes, and so that would be the way it is. And it is a march. You can see that it's a march. Now, it's not horribly difficult to play when you get used to it, but when you consider what you have to know to play something like this, you have to be able to know exactly what your fingerings are for each note. You have to be able to know the timing. When you see that dotted 8/16, you know that's 1 beat. That's no more than 1 beat. It may look complicated, but it all adds up to 1 beat. When you see the triplet, that's 1 beat. So you have to know your timing. Music is quite mathematical. It's just something that you get used to. And when you get used to it, you don't have a problem with it. It's something that you can do. And if it was an 8th notes, then and not triplets, I would count it differently. I would count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But because it's triplets, it's 1 beat, 3 notes, 1 beat, 3 notes, 1 beat, the dotted 8th and 16th, 1 beat, the quarter note. It all adds up. Now, it gets a little bit complicated, and of course, if you're playing marches like I do a lot, then it just comes to you and you just know what to do. But you have to get used to it. For waltz tempo, I could write this as a waltz. I could say something like, so there it would be like a waltz, but I would have to change the whole timing of it. It would have to be in 3/4, there would be no triplets, and there would be no dotted 8ths and 16ths. What it would be, just quarter notes, half notes, and that would be it. You know, with some holes, and it wouldn't make a bad little waltz, but if you're going to do it as a march, you have to change the signature. But basically, the melody is about the same. So there are various ways that you can write music, and it gets pretty interesting when you fool around with it and decide what you want a song to be, a march or a waltz. So I'm going to close it here. We're about out of time, and next time I come in, I'll have another walking stick flute to show you. So please join me then.